Hi everyone, Rachael Thomas here, Member of Parliament for Lethbridge. Recently, the Liberals proposed legislation with regard to what they're calling online harm. Now, as an aside, we don't actually know what is even meant by the term harm because a definition hasn't been given. Now, of course, every reasonable person is against causing harm to another. We shouldn't desire that. We shouldn't celebrate that. We shouldn't want to have that perpetuated in our society. But what Mr. Trudeau and his government are talking about is criminalizing speech that might cause harm to someone's feelings or cause them to be offended. Now, this type of behavior might be inappropriate and it might even be hurtful, but we should ask the question as to whether or not it's the government's role to police what we say and do online. Should the government be determining what we can say, what we can't say, and to what extent? To be clear, hate speech and acts of violence they're already covered off in the criminal code. So of course those things should not be permitted. Of course there are certain disgusting acts that are sometimes committed or shared online that shouldn't be. They should be removed. And of course the police or the authorities should move in. That's agreed upon. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is speech that is potentially offensive or causes hurt feelings. Now, these things aren't good either, but again, the question has to be begged, should the government be policing us in this regard? Okay, so what prompted this new legislation? Well, most likely it's simply for show. The Liberals want to look like they're doing something meaningful in order to make the world a better place, to force people to be nicer to one another. So they put their bill forward last June, but it died when an election was called in the fall. Since then, they've said that they're going through a thorough consultation process and bringing voices back to the table. But what they haven't been honest about is just how bad their proposal was and how damning the responses were from stakeholders behind closed doors. We have discovered that there were 422 submissions that the Heritage Minister refused to make public. Why? Why the secrecy? Well, because they went against the government's censorship agenda. Now, I call it an agenda because this is just one of 3 attempts from the government to regulate what Canadians can see, say, or hear online. In other words, it's not just one piece of legislation. It's 3 pieces. The proposal I'm talking about with regard to online harms also is accompanied by Bill C-11, which has to do with internet regulation, and Bill C-18, which further regulates our online presence. Both of these hand power over to the government to regulate speech and access to information. Now, Bill C-11 is my biggest passion right now. You can read all about it on my Facebook page by scrolling through, and you can even watch my speech given in the House of Commons a few weeks ago. Now, it's undeniable that there is a concerted effort to restrict speech that might be unwanted by this government. But who gets to determine whether or not it's desired? Who gets to determine whether or not it's appropriate? Well, again, this online harms bill that the government is proposing, well, it's them. The government gets to determine. They will now be the arbiters of what gets to stick around and what has to go, what you can say and what you can't, what they deem appropriate and what they deem not. The Liberal Heritage Minister has said many times over that Canadians want this, that they desire greater censorship applied to the internet. And he's even used minority groups as his scapegoat, his point. He says that they stand behind him, that they've been asking for this, as if every minority group in the country thinks the exact same way. Wow. Well, we just found out that in the last few days, the minister has actually been keeping the truth from us, that he's been making misleading statements. Here's the facts. Professor Michael Geist, who I would encourage you to go on and read some of his blog posts, he's just absolutely incredible when it comes to this stuff. But Michael Geist, he submitted what's called an access to information request, which means that we can pull documents that wouldn't otherwise be put in the public realm. So through these documents, we learn just how dangerous and harmful many individuals, many minority groups, many academics, and many industry stakeholders view this legislative proposal to be. Interesting. Now, some submissions said the legislation could be used for censorship as a tactic by political parties to silence certain voices over another. In other words, just because it's the Liberal government putting this legislation in place right now, and they get to determine the type of speech that gets to stay and the type of speech that has to go, future governments could do the same thing, which means that this bill could actually be used for partisan purposes. That's scary in a democracy. It's alarming. Now, what these documents revealed as well is that others warned that the legislation would infringe on our individual privacy and our charter rights as Canadians. Well, that is also alarming. Interestingly, the National Council for Canadian Muslims warned that the legislation could be, and I'll read you the quote here, quote, one of the most significant assaults on marginalized and racialized communities in years. They're calling it an outright assault. But perhaps more damning is the criticism that came from Twitter. Now, they said this, and again, I'll read you the quote. They said that this proposal, quote, sacrifices freedom of expression to the creation of a government-run system of surveillance of anyone who uses Twitter. Wow. They go on to say the proposal by the Government of Canada to allow the Digital Safety Commissioner to block websites is drastic. People around the world have been blocked from accessing Twitter and other services in a similar manner as the one proposed by Canada. And those proposals have come from authoritarian governments, they go on to say. They give examples of China, North Korea, and Iran under the false guise of what they're calling online safety. They go on to say that this impedes people's rights to access information online. Wow. Well, it's no wonder the minister hid these feedback submissions. It's no wonder these documents were kept secret. And I've only read you a handful out of 422 that are incredibly damning toward this government's desire to push its agenda forward. My observation, what I've heard from the constituents of Lethbridge and many Canadians across this country, is that they don't want more government control. Here's the thing. The government is actually called to serve the will of the people, not push its own aggressive and unwanted censorship agenda, not control us. The Liberals, I believe, have now been exposed. They've been exposed for trying to prevent the public from hearing the truth about what they're trying to do. For the last 6 years, the Prime Minister has bragged about his commitment to quote unquote openness and transparency. Well, it's all talk. And I can give you a plethora of examples to that end. This type of secrecy is dangerous, and I believe that it is actually unfit for any governing party. It doesn't matter who you are. In a democratic system like this type of secrecy and this type of agenda around censorship and control is absolutely inappropriate. Okay, so Rachel, what do we do about it? Well, my conservative colleagues and I are fighting this hard, and we're going to continue to do so because we believe in our charter. We believe that the rights and freedoms of Canadians should be respected. We believe that your voice matters and that you should have the ability to say and see and hear the things that you desire. I'm asking that you join us in this fight. I've seen the power behind Canadians when they join together in a unified voice. So I'm asking you, take a moment and send a one-line email to the Liberal Heritage Minister. Just one line, that's it. It just needs to say this: no to Liberal censorship. That's it. Just say no. It's Pablo Rodriguez, and I will provide you with his email in the chat box above. So you'll have an opportunity to email him directly. Take care, guys.